What is happening, YouTube? My name is Matt Faircloth, and my company is called the DeRosa Group. We are a real estate company dedicated to transforming lives through real estate. This is our YouTube channel, as you know, and this is our program called Mentorship Monday. Should you give tenants discounts on their rent? And she requested to please lower her rent by $100 less, which I did. Between $1,000 to $2,500 is what your exposure is for losing that tenant. It's not that hard to do, but it's not something that's done all the time by landlords, as long as they uphold their side of the bargain and you're willing to uphold yours. Either have you, your attorney, or property manager send them a letter, the old tenant saying, well, you got an insurance claim that maybe gave you some money, so maybe that can pay for some of the damages that I caused in the apartment. Here are your options. I hate to say this, but you can bite the bullet, and everything I just said about rent credits and things like that, that's not what I would do personally, but you could just say, well, okay, lesson learned in that. So I would go to small claims court, hire a lawyer, and they're in violation of their lease. They are obligated to pay that to you by the lease, and also any judge in small claims court is going to uphold this. Physical damages to apartments, you making claims that has nothing to do with the COVID eviction moratoriums. And I hope, Janet, you got a security deposit, because if you didn't, then that's on you for not getting a security deposit, because a good portion of that $3,000 you had to pay. People email their questions to helpme@DeRosaGroup.com. helpme@DeRosaGroup.com, and I'll answer your question right here on the YouTube channel for you and everybody else to learn from. Today's question comes from Janeth. Hey, Janeth, thank you for your question. Hey, Matt, I saw your YouTube channel, and I was hoping to provide some guidance regarding my situation with my current rental home. I got you back, Janeth. Bought a brand new rental home, put it up for rent. Looks like a new construction. Cool, interesting stuff. I'd love to see those numbers on new construction for rental. If you guys want to go through that, somebody email to helpme@DeRosaGroup.com some stats or some figures you guys have for new construction rental analysis, and I'll screen share it and we'll do a little analysis here, but I don't have those numbers today. So if you guys have new construction analysis and you want me to break them down for you, Jen has a question that really has to do with tenant credits. Let's get in here. The tenant was a divorcee with 2 kids, and she requested to please lower her rent by $100 less, which I did considering her situation. Interesting. She paid her rent on time, and whatever communications repairs needed were always provided right away, as landlords should always do, meaning like every time this tenant needed something and they turned in the request, Janeth and her company or her property manager did the work that was requested. Good. Well, you know what? That's what you're supposed to do. In the lease, it says you're supposed to take care of repairs. Not everybody does that, but as a good landlord, if a tenant requests something, take care of it. Make the repair, right? It's not that hard to do, but it's not something that's done all the time by landlords. Just make the repair when they ask for it. That's your side of the bargain right there. So then the tenant moves out. Damage is repaired right away. And, I'll get into the damages conversation in a second here. Let's talk about rent credits for tenants, because this conversation is about, should you give tenants discounts on their rent? Here's the thing. Some people are like, no, I want market rate for my units all the time. I want top dollar that I can get. And yeah, that does come in, and bringing rents up to market and getting fair compensation for your rental apartment is certainly something that you are entitled to, something that you should get. But I can tell you right now that this tenant that's coming in is asked for $100 less, that paid their rent on time the entire time of occupancy in the apartment. That's something of value. And getting your rent predictably on the first of the month or whatever it may be is a very, very good thing. And it's a lot cheaper than vacancy of that tenant moving out and then you having to repair the unit, as we're here that Janet had to do, finding a new tenant for that property and getting that extra $100 a month. Because I can tell you, let's just say for conversation, around the national average for an apartment rent, let's just say at $1,000. If that tenant moved out, let's say that unit sits vacant for at least a month. And I'm being very, very generous in saying that a month is as long as it's going to sit vacant, probably 2. If it sits vacant for 1 month, you're losing $1,000 out of the gate. And that's assuming that any repairs that needed to get done were covered in the security deposit. I'm making a bunch of assumptions, right? 2 assumptions. You can get it turned in a month, and that all the unit repair costs came out of security deposit and not out of your pocket. Obviously, that maybe 2 months is more reasonable, and maybe at least $500 out of your own pocket is what those repairs cost, above and beyond the security deposit for just stuff like wear and tear. So worst case, 2 months rent, $2,000 plus $500 in repairs. That's $2,500. That's worst case. Best case is 1 month's rent, no money out of your own pocket for repairs. That's $1,000. So between $1,000 to $2,500 is what your exposure is for losing that tenant. Or tenant asks for a $100 discount in exchange for paying their rent on time, like clockwork every time. That's $100. That's $100 that I'm losing, air quote, in cash flow, maybe $100 I'm investing for stable cash flow. I take that $100 and I don't lose the 1,000 or up to 2,500. My return on investment is either 10 months worth of occupancy of that tenant. So if that tenant pays their rent on time for 10 months, then I'm technically losing, but you're not really losing. I've got stable tenancy and I don't have to deal with that vacancy. Or 25 months is how long it would take to pay me back on the ROI that I would get on the long side. So at least by getting that discount and letting the tenant stay in and pay regularly, I'm getting that stable 10 months. So bottom line, guys, is the most you're going to get exposed to is 10 months worth of cash flow that you wouldn't get if the tenant moved out. So your upside is 10 months. On the long side, it's 25 months. If it were me, I would go ahead and give them the discount as long as they commit to paying their rent on time. And I wouldn't give them much leeway if they stop paying their rent on time after you've taken that discount. Then I would just bite the bullet and get them out and get somebody in that can pay. But I would offer the tenant the discount, especially if they ask for it and they said, listen, give me that discount. I'll pay my rent on time. It's a good arrangement. People forget this, but the biggest expense you're going to have is vacancy. Nowadays with COVID and things like that, if a tenant came to me and says, hey, listen, cut my rent by 10% and I'll commit to pay my rent on time. Not every tenant's paying their rent at all right now with COVID. So I would say that the biggest expense you're going to have is obviously vacancy or a non-paying unit. Put those in the same bucket. So it's very valuable to have a tenant that's willing to pay their rent and have that and honor their side of the lease obligations of paying their rent on time. And you honor your sides of making the repairs as Janet did, right? That would be my 2 cents, Janet. And about rent credits and giving tenants discounts on their rent, absolutely, as long as they uphold their side of the bargain and you're willing to uphold yours. Unfortunately, things didn't go so well for Janet, so I'm going to read you guys the rest of the email we got at helpme@DeRosaGroup.com. Tenant moved out on February 8th, looks like of this year. I sent her breakdown notice and pictures of all the damage the tenant had made to the apartment, which totaled up to $3,000 in repairs to the apartment. I had the damage repaired right away to get preparation for the new tenant. February 18th, after she moves out, we had a cold storm in the area, severe power outage, causing my heater to burst and causing damages while the new tenant was there. The previous tenant now refused to pay for the damages, saying that it's not fair that she pays for damages while the storm ended up ruining the house. The old tenant saying, well, you had a hot water heater burst. You got an insurance claim. That maybe gave you some money. So maybe that can pay for some of the damages that I caused in the apartment. Again, upholding your side of the bargain. The tenant that paid their rent on time the entire time while they're in the unit is now not willing to uphold their side of the lease, which says that they're supposed to pay for repairs to the apartment once they move out. Obviously not fair to Janet. Here are your options. I hate to say this, but you could bite the bullet and everything I just said about rent credits and things like that. That's not what I would do personally, but you could just say, well, okay, lesson learned. And this has nothing to do with the rent credit versus about not being willing to pay for damages. Tenants that were paying full burden rent, we're not willing to pay for those damages. I hope, Janet, you got a security deposit, because if you didn't, then that's on you for not getting a security deposit, because a good portion of that $3,000 you had to pay should have come out of the security deposit. The whole thing about the water heater bursting and all that, I'm sorry to hear that. That certainly shouldn't be any type of consideration and should not be a factor in whether or not you give the tenant a credit or not, on whether or not you're getting an insurance settlement for something that had nothing to do with the tenant, a hot water heater bursting, right? That's like apples and car tires. It's got nothing to do with each other. The other option you would do, which is probably what I would do, either have your attorney or property manager send them a letter summarizing it again and saying, hey, listen, you have until this date and I'll take a payment plan. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll work with you. But if you don't pay us, then this is the next step, which would be I'd take them to small claims court. And so I would go to small claims court, hire a lawyer, because this is something you've got to claim on. If you can prove they did the damage, if you can prove the unit was in better condition than it was when they moved out, then they're in violation of their lease. They are obligated to pay that to you by the lease. And also any judge in small claims court is going to uphold this. And small claims court and physical damages to apartments, you making claims to that has nothing to do with the COVID eviction moratoriums. And the courts are going to be open. They're going to hear your case. You're going to show up with pictures and proof that they caused the damage, or that it looked like this when they moved in and now it looks like this when they moved out. Two different conversations, and you're going to get a judgment, and you can pursue that judgment through collection agencies and things like that there, and pretty much get made whole. We've gotten made whole for a while, and judgments tend to stay out there for a long time. So tenant goes to buy a house, buy a car, do anything that involves their credit. They're going to have to settle up that claim that you have with them, just like they would if you weren't their landlord. If you had a small claims with them against something else, you would obviously be able to enforce that claim. If they were your neighbor and you both owned your homes and they did something with the fence on your property, you'd take them to small claims court and enforce something with small claims court that way too. So that's probably what I would do if I were in your circumstance. So that's my help. again, two different conversations: small claims court claims on tenants for repairs on apartments, which I'm sorry to hear happened to you, versus offering tenants discounts on their rent in exchange for paying their rent on time. That's a different conversation in that. So good double whammy here, Janeth. Love it. I hope that was of value to you guys. And if you guys want to email your questions to help me at DeRosaGroup.com, that is help me at DeRosaGroup.com. We will answer your questions right here on the YouTube channel for you and everyone else to learn from. Thanks for watching, guys, and have a great and profitable week.